Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Rewriting the Narrative. Mare, did you pump some iron this morning?
I did pump some iron this morning. Did you?
I did. I had an upper body day. I hit my overhead presses and pendulum rows, which are my two main compounds for this day. So that was my iron pumping. Actually, while we're on the topic of pumping iron, I don't know, like I know we have like a good broad range as far as you guys listening. Like some of you guys have a lifting background, like bodybuilding background. Some of you guys are like more like runners. Thinking of someone off the top of my head in particular. But anyway, Pumping Iron is a just classic like bodybuilder movie. And
Good.
at the other gym that you and I went to when you were down here, they are playing it constantly
That's
like on the
great.
TVs, and it's like such a vibe. But I don't know if anyone's familiar with that movie, but it's
Good movie.
definitely a good vibe to see like Ronnie Coleman and just yeah.
Definitely. It's funny. I actually got Pendlay Rose plugged in this week for the first time, but today was mix upper and lower body, and my dreaded Cossack squats entered the picture again. I love,
Are
I
you in
love,
my notes app? Like, are like
I know.
what? We have the same training.
It's crazy, and it's funny. It's like whenever I program something in for a client and I'm like, oh man, this is gonna kill. Like it's like karma comes back because it's like Z presses and things like that. But the Cossacks entered the picture now. But I love them, but I just find them very humbling. Very humbling.
Especially when you film yourself. But you guys, it is important to do so. And it's also important to get a nutrient dense diet and get a full set of complete lab work. And brings us to our topic today, which is going to be iron, specifically talking about iron deficiency and anemia, which are different things. And we're going to be talking about why iron supplements aren't always long-term solution or solution at all for low iron, and why we always want to step back and look at that bigger picture when it comes to nutrient deficiencies as a whole. And that was one thing that I wanted to say was, as you guys are listening, especially like my coaches out there, this like we're going to be talking about iron specifically, but in this conversation you can kind of grab onto things and ideas that we're going to talk about and present and think about, like my client who's chronically deficient in vitamin D despite taking supplements, like what's going on here, B vitamins, et cetera, et cetera. So just kind of a little bit of a segue, but iron deficiency is pretty common in females. And there are a lot of different root causes, but like globally it is one of the top deficiencies. However, I also wonder, like, again, knowing what we know, what else might be going on causing that lab, on lab level iron deficient state. So maybe we start with definitions. I don't know if you got.
I was just going to ask you if you could go ahead and maybe, because you were saying that if you could define for folks, because you do a really good job of this, how you differentiate explaining to somebody the difference between iron deficiency and anemia.
Yeah, so there's going to be different stages of a deficient state. Anemia is a general, like broad global term, and it isn't just talking about iron deficiency. We're also talking about vitamin B12 and folate deficiencies, which are megaplastic anemias. And when we're talking about different stages of iron deficiency, you have iron deficiency, and then you have iron deficiency anemia, which is when those stores of iron, ferritin, are going to be, depleted, versus iron deficiency is maybe like we're starting to see like low levels, but we're not in that anemic state yet. And just broadly, anemia is a general term for having fewer red blood cells or a reduced amount of hemoglobin in each red blood cell. So you guys like may know like symptoms like off the top of your head, like fatigue. I mean, that's huge, like the biggest thing that comes to people's mind. Pale skin, hair loss, like hair, iron, B vitamins, huge as far as that goes. Just feeling weak and tired. So we often talk about like thyroid and just calorie intake and whatnot, but especially for like athletes and whatnot struggling with maybe some of those symptoms, anemia is something to, consider. And one other thing that I wanted to mention is anemia is a symptom. It's not a diagnosis. There's that underlying root cause that we want to address. So anemia is more like the term. And then we want to think about, okay, why is this person in, that state?
Yeah. And I think that one thing to just like touch on that real specifically with regards to low iron, I think that the bigger things that we think of is one, like our body does have a recycling system, right? So, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but our body does have a recycling system for iron. And so that is right there, one thing that we have to consider with regards to those raw materials that is needed to make iron go round and round, get from, in the blood to in the tissue into the cell. So going back to micronutrients, huge things. So like copper, vitamin A, really important there. Looking at chronic stress. So unfortunately, stress is always going to come into the picture regardless of what conversation we're talking about. Excess estrogen, and I say that with caution because I think that we need to be like very thoughtful with regards to that. Definitely not to put fear around estrogen, even with regards to excess supplementation. So vitamins and minerals work synergistically and antagonistically. And so we really want to be careful with regards to supplementation because one can be kind of working with the other. But then I think like what Sarah did a good job alluding to at the very beginning is, again, going back to one like thyroid health, gut health, the things that make all those micronutrients go round and round is really, really important. So I know for myself and, I know for Sarah, whenever we see iron coming back on blood work and it is low, our first knee jerk is never, you need to take an iron supplement. We start peeling back the layers of those potential things that can inhibit that recycling system and start saying, okay, looking maybe even elsewhere on the lab work itself to see, again, are we seeing those B vitamins? Okay, well, B vitamins, we're seeing low vitamin D. Could this, again, looking at that gut health, looking at thyroid. So I think peeling those things back and being a detective is really important.
Yeah, I think thinking about, is this a state of deficiency that we're seeing, or is this a state of needing more of something? So deficiency could be blood loss, like for our clients with heavy menstrual cycles. You mentioned estrogen, so we could kind of have like a vicious kind of cycle there, potentially, pun not intended. But so blood loss and heavy menstrual bleeding, GI bleeding. So in the cases of like IBD, irritable bowel disease, ulcers, can deplete those iron stores, or deficiencies in the form of not just getting enough. Those would kind of be some things to think about. And then like depletion from hard training, from just increased demands, like such as like pregnancy, like you need more iron. So that's something to consider, just periods of growth. And then I would say like the other kind of side of this is going to be thinking about like what you started to alluding to, is that nutrient side of things. Like, are we not getting like enough of something? Are we absorbing or not absorbing? No, I was going to say, so then we want to think about like, are you eating enough iron? Are you eating, enough of those cofactors that you brought up, B vitamins, vitamin A, copper, zinc even? Like, are we getting enough minerals and vitamins as a whole in our diet? And if we are, or if we're supplementing, then we want to be like, okay, why aren't we absorbing? What's going on here, in the gut, potentially in the liver, as well.
Yeah, exactly. A couple things I'll mention before we go on as far as like looking at our nutrition is as far as like vitamins and minerals. So looking at copper, it's funny, I'm working with a couple clients right now where they have been previously, told about like that they need to take iron supplements. And I'm like, hey, like we need to actually look at your diet first, as well as just like other parts of your health, ensuring that they're eating like copper rich foods. Beef liver is our grass fed, whatever, but beef liver, different types of livers, whether it's chicken or whatnot, have different quantities, but beef liver is a really good one. That is, I'm going to say, is a supplement because most people I know outside of Sarah and other people do not consume beef liver. Maybe you can tell that story either now or another time with your beef liver piece. There's a whole food vitamin C, again, really, really important. Vitamin A would be like whole eggs. huge. Dairy, that's another one. Fish, meats. Our favorite, cod liver oil, that's another great one. And then getting out and getting some sunshine, I would say try to get nature's vitamin D first would be kind of my go-tos. And then zinc, pumpkin seeds, great source. Beef liver, also great source. But those things I think that can go really far, just ensuring that variety in your diet as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should step back and talk about maybe like iron, like metabolism a little bit, because a lot of those nutrients are important for something called ceruloplasm, which you can actually test for in your blood. But copper, vitamin A, really big key players as far as making that transport, protein and helping as far as like iron metabolism, so that it's not just, maybe we're seeing iron like in your blood, but is it actually getting into your tissues? And that's really important. And we'll do another episode on high levels of iron, but you can see, high levels of iron, and it's because it's kind of stuck out there, and it's not being actually, absorbed and in your tissues. So we'll do another episode on iron overload and cases of high iron, because that is something that we definitely see a lot of. But yeah, as far as like, I did want to mention like females and female athletes in particular, because that's a big part of our audience, and this just goes for anybody that's active. You do need more iron the more active that you are, especially like my endurance athletes. So there's a kind of master regulator of iron absorption, and it's in the gut, and it's called hepcidin. And this is a protein where when levels are low, more iron can be absorbed. And when levels are high, less iron can be absorbed. So what kind of happens is, like, let's just say like you're getting plenty of iron, maybe you're supplementing. In theory, then hepcidin would be, either at like a baseline, or maybe it would increase to kind of prevent that absorption when iron's abundant. But when iron levels are low, then that hepcidin, would decrease to allow for more absorption. Now, hepcidin also responds to states of inflammation. So as much as it is an amazing stressor, training is a big stressor. And I don't think we've done a like training gut health podcast specifically yet, but back to, that absorption piece in the gut, athletes tend to have higher levels of, or I'm sorry, am I saying that right? Higher levels of hepcidin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because of that inflammatory, state, especially post training. So that can impact iron absorption.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to consider. And then any state of inflammation, whether it's hard training, periods, or God, the list goes on as far as what counts as inflammation. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, I normally think of, I explained this to a client who has hemochromatosis, which is the complete opposite of what we're talking about. It's a genetic situation. But I explained hepcidin, or hepcidin, however you want to say it, as a lock, and ferroportin, porton, a door. So that's how I say it, or my brain, I see it as ferroportin. It's a port, it's a door. And so if hepcidin or hepcidin is present, it locks the door so iron can't leave. And then if hepcidin, the lock, is low, then the door stays wide open and iron floods the bloodstream. So that's kind of how I think of those, whether that's, I'm going to say anatomically perfectly correct, but that's just how my brain can remember this one is present. That means the door is locked. Iron can't leave the cell. If hepcidin is low, it's unlocked and the door stays wide freaking open. Or in hemochromatosis, it's just busted completely.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I really like that lock and key analogy. And like you said, like, and I mean, we can't say this enough. The body is not as simple as do X, Y happens. No. Like there are so many moving parts, and everything is so intricately connected, which kind of brings us to why, iron supplements aren't always the answer when you see low levels of iron. So actually, before we get into that, I want to actually talk about testing first, because that is like always like a first step is, we want to do that comprehensive iron panel but also get comprehensive lab work done as a whole. So a good starting place is just to get an iron TIBC, iron saturation, and ferritin, which is your storage protein. It's a storage protein of iron. Again, we'll do a whole other blog podcast on that coming soon. But we want to get that full iron panel. And then we also want to look at your CBC to look at those red blood cells. We want to get a CMP. And then, at this point, like we might as well get thyroid panel. We might as well like get like that full panel done, looking at other, systems, because we definitely want to get some insight as far as gut and liver, which we can gather from a comprehensive metabolic panel and a comprehensive or a complete blood count. So comprehensive labs, super important, because we don't want to just assume based off symptoms, because symptoms do overlap.
Yeah.
And then from there, we're starting to kind of review everything all together and start to think about like why you might be deficient before we go to a iron supplement.
Yeah, I would say this is that moment, if we're like, again, our favorite word, triaging thing, to do blood work, really assess things, lock in any foundational stuff that we can. So this may be an opportunity to review diet, to review digestive, meal hygiene, stress. Like this is a really great time to open up those conversations of what can I do for free right now? And then I think that this is where that decision tree of next steps is. Me, like as far as like testing goes, I would be either considering, depending on the situation, doing like a GI map and or a hair tissue mineral analysis. I really like those. I find it's really interesting, for example, if we see low levels in the blood, but then we actually might be seeing high levels in the tissue, and seeing how other factors can affect that. But then it's interesting is I think that GI map does need to be on the table for a lot of people.
I agree, especially if like that diet piece like is there, because now we're thinking low stomach acid, what's causing that low stomach acid. Go back to our last episode to kind of review there. Nutrients is a great place, to start, is like, are we like even getting enough in our diet? Go to Chronometer, check things out. And then start unpacking that gut health. Like maybe we do look at some light support, in the means of digestive bitters, maybe we start there. And then we're starting to look at the rest of that lab panel and look at liver function, for example, maybe markers of stress. Yeah. Like maybe we're seeing high cortisol. Go ahead. We're cutting, even like, we're jumping a little bit.
Sorry. I was gonna say like even like fat soluble vitamins, like going again, looking at that your serum blood work, and if you're seeing like vitamin D like constantly low, and you're like, well, okay, iron's low, and I know that I need vitamin A to be part of this iron recycling system. Again, going back to like, are we utilizing and breaking down fats? Well, this could be like a bile support situation. If somebody doesn't have their gallbladder, starting to kind of look into those things.
Yeah, and that goes back to like that, looking at that comprehensive metabolic panel, seeing what liver is doing, because I mean, liver is just huge for iron metabolism and recycling. So both iron transport and just metabolism, super, super important. So we want to look at that. And then we want to look at like gut health as far as absorption. Then we also want to think about like, are you somebody that does have a heavy period? This came up for me, recently with a client. It was kind of a double whammy with, yes, she does have a heavy cycle, and that gut piece, which again, like that goes back to if somebody does have heavy menstrual bleeding, and maybe we do see a ferritin that's tanked, low levels, of iron, low saturation. So she is like anemic, right? And she's feeling it. Maybe short term, this is a case where absolutely implementing a iron supplement could be really, really important to help her just feel better and replete those stores, while we are also addressing those root causes. So this isn't to say that we're like anti-iron supplement. We just want to make sure that we are supplementing appropriately and also have a game plan for that, because I can't tell you guys listening, I know I don't have to tell Mare the amount of new people I work with or consults that I have, and it's like, oh, you've been on these supplements for years and you don't even know why anymore.
Yeah.
That's an issue, and there's been no follow-up testing, etc. And again, nutrients, like people think like, oh, it's just a supplement, it's just some iron, or it's just some vitamin D, no big deal. No, like again, everything plays a role. Like Mare said, there's synergistic minerals and vitamins, and then antagonistic. So again, like it does matter, and that's not to scare you, but it's just to remember to stay curious and not just like blindly go about your protocols and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. It's like whenever we have somebody coming in and saying like, "Hey, I'm taking, an iron supplement or any type of supplement," and we say like, "Why?" and like, "I don't even know because my iron came up low." And I'm like, "Did anybody ask you why your iron's low?" So I think staying curious and asking deeper questions. And it's again, it's not that we're seeking illness nor disease or seeking there to be something wrong, but just being thoughtfully curious, I think is a good thing.
Absolutely. And then, other things that we want to do are going to be, lowering inflammation. So maybe we want to look at like, how's your sleep? Are we maybe in a state of, insulin resistance? Like what's going on metabolically? Because, or on the flip side, like, we can be, in a state of inflammation because of metabolic dysfunction in the form of maybe, obesity or being overweight, carrying a lot of excess fat. But then on the flip side, you can also be in a state of inflammation because maybe we are, too lean or not getting enough calories. So nutrient deficiency can exist when you are both over consuming and under consuming. It's not always that you're not eating enough calories. It comes back to nutrients, as a whole. Carbohydrate intake is also, actually important for iron, absorption, going back to that hepcidin, hormone, because if we are carb depleted, especially as athletes, not getting, good carbs in around our training, then that can also impact iron absorption. So that is something to also kind of keep in mind here.
I think we nailed it. I mean, there's definitely going to be some more podcasts that we're going to be doing on this because as Sarah said in the beginning, we felt like just talking about iron deficiency and anemia was the focus of today, and then getting into potential, high iron, high ferritin, that deserves its own shine.
Absolutely. And I did want to just briefly touch on like supplements. Like, supplements, like I said, could absolutely play a role here. You would just want to talk to your provider about what form of iron they're recommending, because some forms like ferrous sulfate can cause some GI issues like slow motility. So constipation is something I see a lot of with those iron supplements, and especially if it's like super high dose. So considering a iron biglycinate or iron chelate is going to be a little bit gentler on the gut if you are looking at supplementing. And again, anytime we're supplementing, like especially like a nutrient like that, or for me like vitamin D, for you too, copper, etc., we want to retest labs. Maybe it's like, okay, 12, 16 weeks, let's see where we're at. Whether that's like you brought up a hair tissue mineral analysis, which is a test we can maybe nerd out about on a future episode, getting that follow-up, lab work done to kind of see again what else is going on here.
Yep, exactly. And I think that something that you mentioned before somewhere, I think in this podcast, was the importance of vitamin C. And as much as we definitely agree that whole food vitamin C can help with regards to increase that absorption of iron. So if you're taking a supplementation, ensuring that your diet has whole food vitamin C in, same thing, going back to that gut health. Like I think that you guys are now hearing that you can supplement all you want, but again, if digestive health, which includes liver health, is impaired or not optimal, it can just muck things up quite a lot.
No muck. We don't want muck. That
You
does
don't want
not
a
sound
mucky
fun.
gut.
We want good energy. We want good iron and iron metabolism and recycling and absorption. And, I guess to like last thing for my vegans and vegetarians, like this is also a consideration where, yes, we can get iron, through plants, like spinach, beans, leafy greens. We all know Popeye. Like, I don't have to tell you, hopefully. But, ultimately those animal sources, so that heme iron is going to definitely be more robust and better absorbed by your body. So definitely would consider getting that full, iron panel, as well as, looking at gut health and everything else if you do choose to be vegan or, vegetarian. It can be done. It's just a little bit trickier. So you definitely want to dive deeper with something like Chronometer. to make sure that you are getting the nutrients that you need.
Exactly.
Okay, I could go on and on. I'll keep thinking of things. So I'm going to stop us here, you guys. As always, if you're ever listening to this and you're like, oh, I'm not like quite clear on that, reach out. Like, we're friendly. Like, send us a DM on Instagram. I know you can't like communicate as easily via a podcast platform, but send us an email. I'll link some blogs in the show notes, and we will see you next time.
Bye, guys.